Welcome back to The Big Issue, and a good morning as well to our viewers on television. Big Issue today discussing the Vice President's town hall delivery on the achievements of the NPP government over the past 3 years. And we'll also look at the energy sector and also the COVID-19, aka coronavirus issue, and whether to evacuate Ghanaian students in Wuhan or not, as pressure mounts on the government from parents, from students. Government also putting out a side of the story with support from the Ghana Health Service as to what the current situation is. So, for those of you who also want to share your thoughts, you can reach us on our WhatsApp line. I just read a couple of messages. I will add a few. So, +233 550 585 832, +233 550 585 832. You can also reach us on Twitter at City973 is the Twitter handle. The hashtag is The Big Issue. You can also reach me on at East Sportsman on the same hashtag, The Big Issue. We're also on Facebook, streaming live on the City TV Facebook page. So you can leave your comments and questions there. And like I always say, just keep the comments civil and we will have no problems. I'm doing the show this morning with Dr. Odu Sakodie, an economist, Alexander Aban, Member of Parliament for Gumua West, Alasan Suhini, Member of Parliament for Tamale North, and Franklin Kujo, President of Imani Africa. Honorable Aban, do you want initial comments or we should just go into the break?
He's supposed to have, he has a deadline. He was given an ultimatum.
We'll get there. It's a part of the conversation.
Just to say that it's today. So he should respond to it.
He will respond to it before he leaves.
Deadline for the evacuation of...
Yes, Suhini is yes. If you don't evacuate, we will evacuate you.
Okay.
I'll get help from you.
Probably I should just give an initial comment.
Okay, give your initial comment, then I can come to Dr. Sakodie.
And put it in perspective.
Okay.
I must confess that when it comes to the issue of economics, I see myself more as a dwarf in the midst of giants in the field.
Okay.
I'm dealing with Doctor in that area, and of course, Franklin. I do not know about my friend, whether he's an economist.
I'm as a lay economist as you are.
Okay.
I'm really lay.
I will be that as it may. Let me just make my initial comment that when it comes to the use of economic indices, I'm sure that there are sources where you get the figures, right? I mean, I'm saying this in response to the touting from the minority that what the Vice President did was statistical
Galamsey.
As though those figures were manufactured by him, right? Because that is the impression it sends out there. Thankfully, he actually stated clearly that those statistics are available, they are out there, and that if there were any figures contrary to what he had said, the opposition could also present their case using those statistics or those variables, and then we can all cross-check to see. Thankfully, I've listened carefully to the experts. Professor, I don't know your name.
Dr.
Sakodie, yes. I listened carefully to him. He made good analysis of everything that was said and did not seem to challenge the figures as were turned out or put out there. Where he thought things were very accurate, he stated it. Where he thought the impact had not been felt and all that, and the projection, both positive and negative, that may befall us as a result of the debt we have accumulated and all those kind of things he mentioned. But let me quickly do, I don't know whether I should call that a rebuttal of what Mr. Suhini said. He tried to create the impression that during their time they were going uphill and had a lot of difficulties to surmount, right? And it appears that things are rosy in the during the regime of the NPP. And so
not
to that
rosy,
extent...
Not rosy, but better comparatively.
Better, okay. I'm just using these words to show the contrast that you wanted to draw. It is not to say that everything is very comfortable. But if you want me to adopt your words, no problem. That you were going uphill and we were going downhill. And that you felt that, if anything at all, the energy to be exerted in going downhill must be much smaller than the energy one requires to move uphill. Probably this can be understood much better if we started from President Kufuor's time. Okay? Because I want to let him know that the argument he's creating, or the argument he's making, and creating the impression that there were different times. Okay? And so we should look at it from within contexts. If we're going to do the contextual analysis, then probably you start from Kufuor's time and you realize that at that time commodity prices, especially oil, skyrocketed from 50-something to 150-something, right? And at that time, we had not actually started any serious commercial production of oil. Certainly. Where we would say we were taking advantage of that, right? But in the midst of all that, and oil would have its own spiral effect on almost everything. And in the midst of that, the economy was managed, okay, in such a way that the banks were even following customers, okay, right? That's not propaganda.
You let you go on.
Right?
Did the bank follow you?
Yes, the banks were following us that we should go for loans and all that, right? I think we did not have the liquidity crunch that they had and all that, right? So,
actually, do you mean marketing as in advertising, banking?
Yes,
yes. So if you look at it from that point, right, it is the same economy, it's the same basket of things that we are dealing with, right? The best I can say is that given all the circumstances that they had and we had, things were not materially different. And that if they had problems, it was as a result of their inability to manage it well. Let me just end it there, and then we can deal with the issues.
Okay, all right. Then let me come to
my little economics.
Okay, no worries. So let me come to
street economics.
Let me come to Dr. Sako. Then we can now go into the details. Let's start from the debt. Okay. I want us to start from the public debt.
Okay.
And there seems to be contention there over the numbers. And I have the presentation Dr. Bawumia gave here. He started. The public debt was quite high up. Started from fiscal deficit, then he went to the budget. And on the budget, on debt, what basically he said was, I'm just trying to bring that up so that I can read it. Okay. Yes, it says public debt. It says total public debt has increased from 122 billion in 2016 to 214 billion at the end of November 2019, including the cost of the banking sector cleanup. Excluding the cost of the banking sector cleanup, the debt stock stands at 203 billion Ghana cedis. However, the strong fiscal adjustment and better debt management has meant that the rate of debt accumulation has slowed down considerably to the lowest in the last decade. Between 2008 and 2012, Ghana's debt stock increased by 267%. Between 2012 and 2016, the increase was 243%, but between 2016 and 2019, the increase has been 76%, including the cost of the banking sector cleanup. Furthermore, the debt to GDP ratio increased by 49% between 2008 and 2012, 19% between 2012 and 2016, and 3.9% between 2016 and 2019, excluding the cost of the banking sector cleanup, or 9.3%. In this regard, the government of Nana Akufo-Addo has therefore kept its promise of reducing the rate of borrowing. Doc, what did you make of that? Because I've also heard you raise issues of off-budget borrowing.
Yes. Well, I didn't know Honorable is the Deputy Minister for Health, but your sector is really doing well. It's been growing over 20% for the last 3 years or so. Whatever you are doing, I think keep doing it. Yeah. So, the public debt.
Yes, let's start from there.
Honorable Akando doesn't see that.
And it's even projected to grow over 22%.
But in terms of the manifesto delivery promises, they are 39% health.
Really?
Yes.
What? We can just oppose that.
But if you mean the terms of investment and the things they are doing,
Maybe.
then maybe yes.
Yeah, maybe.
But
Maybe honorables you started it.
I'll explain. That's why a candor is always breathing over
hospitals
their
they
head,
built.
because we could have actually been
the
growing
chief's
much
compound and all that.
better. Yeah, we could have actually been growing much better.
So
That's why you're smiling.
Smiling.
Anyway,
The public debt is an issue. It's a big issue.
Yes, you expressed concern
It's
about
a
that.
big problem. I don't want to see Ghana in a debt distress position, because, like in my earlier comment, it's going to disturb all the macroeconomic gains. And when we get ourselves into that, IMF will start knocking on our doors, and we'll go back to them, because they are macroeconomists. They look at those inflation, exchange rate, balance of payment. Once they start, your debt disturbs those variables, they will start knocking on your doors. And Ghana will go back to IMF again if we don't deal with the public debt. In terms of nominal figures, the debt has increased. As a ratio of GDP, it has increased. That's worsened. Let me put it that way. The previous administration added about 86 billion in terms of figures in Ghana cedis. In 3 years, we're talking about 92 billion. So in nominal figures, you have increased it more than the previous one. What I see as accumulation, he used the debt GDP ratio accumulation over the years, which that one is okay. But again, when they came to the nominal figures and said accumulation in nominal figures too, they are better, when they talked about 76% and 240% for the previous administration, I think that one is quite problematic, because I see that as a change in debt, just the rate of change. What is the rate of change? The rate of change is simply saying your debt today minus your debt yesterday over your debt yesterday times 100.
Okay.
That is the change. What I see here is change. When they use the ratios accumulation, I agree, but you can't use the nominal figures and say it's accumulation. Well, maybe it's all about how you define it. But I'm saying that what I see here, the 76% versus the 240%, is about the rate of change. Why is the rate of change in the previous administration bigger? Is because they picked the debt from a very low level, 36 billion cedis to 122 billion. So the rate of change will be very high.
Significant.
Now, you picked it from 122 to 214. You've added into 2 to it, but the rate of change is 76%. So it's like saying 50 billion cedis of 100 billion is 50%. It's also saying 1 billion cedis of 1 billion cedis is 100%. You see the difference?
Yes.
So in terms of quantum, you've added more, but because the base was bigger, and then in the previous administration, they had a lower base, which was 36.
Yeah.
So that is where the difference is coming from. But let's even assume that the rate of accumulation is lower. Let's agree. I've had my own understanding of that, but let's agree that is true. It is just one of the many indicators when we are assessing the public debt, which is good, which is favorable. It's just one. The rest are all worsening.
Like
The debt to GDP ratio that they use. You know, when you rebase your GDP in 2018 and it increased by some 24%, it caused a fall in the debt to GDP ratio. We started borrowing again, and now we are hitting 62%. The denominator should be the same. So if the vice president is using before rebased GDP, it should be the same across board.
That's true.
If you are using rebased GDP, it should be the same across board. Now, this is the statistics. Before rebasing, it was somewhere 73% in the previous administration. It should have been around 56, 57 by now. Now, if you use the rebased, the previous one should have been somewhere 55 to 57%, and now we are talking about the real issue, which is 62.2%. So whichever way you look at it, it has worsened. So the debt GDP ratio has worsened. Number two, this is even more dangerous. The debt service, the debt service, usually we use tax revenue, but I realize that when we use the tax revenue, it is going to cause panic. Because, when we speak like this, international communities are also listening to us. So we won't use the tax revenue. We will use the total revenue and grant. When you use the total revenue and grant, debt service. And interestingly, if you are not, excuse me to say, somebody who really wants to do research and look up for the figures, you will see a variable called amortization very early in the budget. It has been put in the appendix. It's about 35 or so billion Ghana cedis for this year.
Can you explain? We have listeners. What is amortization?
It's just payment of principal. Okay. If you go to borrow, say, 100 cedis from someone, and the interest is, say, 20%, you pay the interest every year on that 100 cedis. But when the maturity period is, elapsed, you have to pay the principal plus the amount you went to borrow. That is what we call amortization. Okay. So when we are talking about debt service for a particular year, the year 2020, you add the interest payment, which is about 21 point something billion cedis, to the amortization, which is roughly around 37 billion Ghana cedis. If you add these two and you express it as a ratio of GDP, it's somewhere 58.9%. More than half of the total revenue and grant. That is how alarming the situation is.
Why is it bad?
Your total revenue and grant, you're using 58.9% just to service your debt. Remaining about 42% for your other things, payment of salaries, your infrastructure, goods and services payment, and so on and so forth. So it really worsens the rigidities that we've been talking about in the budget. Now, that rigidity, I told you, it was worse in 2013, 14, 15, 16. No, 2013 not included. 2014, 16, 14, 15, 16. Then improved. They were in negative of 6 to 9%. Then we got plus 4% in the year 2017. Then 2018, last quarter up to now, it has worsened.
Yeah.
We are talking about something like 11% or so. Now, negative 11%, which is bad for an economy like that. The other area we can look at when we are discussing the public debt is also to express the external component of the public debt in dollars. We borrow outside. We can borrow in euros, in pounds, in Chinese yuan, but we put all into dollars. We convert all into dollars, okay, because it is the internationally accepted currency. So there's an external component of that. About 50.4% of public debt is in the external component. It's in somebody's currency. Somebody's currency that you don't have control over. Anytime the cedi depreciates, it increases the external component of the public debt without borrowing. Cedi depreciation alone has accounted for about 27% of the public debt. The cedi depreciation alone. And then we have the off-budget borrowings, which IFS, we are doing a research, so I don't want to preempt that. Okay. So we wait for our press conference, and then we'll talk about it.
But it's a problem.
It is a problem because when you add it to the public debt, it will be higher than 214 that we are talking about.
And by off-budget, since he won't talk, maybe I can explain.
Let me give you an example.
Okay.
Just one example, and the rest we wait for the full research to Get Fund.
Okay.
Has levies. So there's something we call securitization. You pledge the inflows for the Get Fund. You use it to go and borrow. It doesn't sit in the books of the central government and accounted as public debt. And this is just one. And it didn't start with this administration. It started in the year 2016. So some amount like 3 billion, you won't find them in the figure quoted as public debt in the budget.
But it is there.
But it is there. It is there. So those off-budget borrowing, we will do a whole lot on that.
Okay.
I was talking about the external component of the public debt. When you draw the graph of the public debt, the total public debt, and you divide it into external debt and then domestic debt, you see that the public debt, the total public debt shape is taken from the external debt shape. So whenever the external debt goes up, the total public debt goes up. Whenever it comes down, it comes down. When it goes up, it goes up. What is it telling us? It's telling us that the major driver of our public debt has been the external component of the public debt. The domestic debt is not having that much effect on the public because we can control our cities.
Yeah.
The depreciation doesn't affect our cities. The borrowing from the Eurobond, that appetite in 2014, 15, 16 was a major problem. Before the year 2013, we had our domestic component of the public debt higher, greater than the external debt. After 2017, because of our appetite for the Eurobond, now we have the external component of public debt greater than the domestic. Number one. Number two, even what we call domestic debt, about 30% of that is held by foreigners. And in June, July last year, when the US Fed increased their rate, and then the foreigners decided, the investors decided to remove their funds, transfer their funds from Ghana to the US economy, we saw the depreciation of the cedi. Okay? In that period. So that component which is held by foreigners is also a major concern. So what do we do here? I've talked about the nominal figure. I've talked about the debt to GDP ratio. I've talked about the debt service as a ratio of tax revenue, but it will be worse. It will cause fear and panic. So we are increasing the base to talk about the total revenue and grants to make the figure look a little bit better so that, we don't get too much worried.
Engaging in statistical collapse.
And the fourth one, I was talking about external debt over exports.
Okay.
Because we don't print dollars. Where do we get our dollars to service our debt, to pay our debts? It's from our exports. The cocoa, the gold, the whatever we have, those proceeds. So anytime you are talking about public debt, you also have to look at that area too. External debt over your export proceeds. It's even worse. It's even worse than all the variables. So this public debt, I thought we were going to deal with it. When this administration started in the year 2017, I was so happy because I saw the short-term measures, and I was hoping that with the short-term measures, going forward, they will put in place the medium to long-term measures to deal with the public debt. And it looks like they just ended with the short-term measures. Short-term measures, example, you borrow at a lower rate to pay off the debt at a higher rate. It's a measure, debt reprofiling and all that we hear. You can also borrow at a longer maturity period, say 20 years, to pay a debt which will give you which was a shorter maturity period, say 10 years, so that you can get some relief and work more to pay later. These were short-term measures, and I felt things were going to look better. And it looks like they ended there at the short-term measures. And nothing is being done for the medium to long-term measure. And we keep borrowing. Right from the word go, there is nothing wrong with borrowing. Nothing wrong. There's economic justification for borrowing. But you see, it becomes a problem when you miss the condition. When you miss the economic justification. What are the justifications? Number one, you borrow, and we have business or entrepreneurs listening to us. So I'm not scaring them that they shouldn't borrow. I even want to borrow and start my own business. So you borrow when the expected return is greater than the interest you pay on it. Your expected return on your investment, then you are free to borrow. Okay. That's the first condition. The second one is you borrow for infrastructure.
Okay.
You borrow for infrastructure, and that infrastructure must last at least the maturity period.
Okay.
For example, if you borrow to construct road, so the tolls we collect on the road would, go for the first condition, which is the expected return, the tolls. Legon, we borrowed some 3 million some time ago, Professor Aite's time, and I really commend him for that. Now, it looks like we finished paying crap, but the card is still there. People are still using it. So that was an economic justification for borrowing. The expected returns, the tolls we collect on our roads should be enough to at least help us pay for the loans we collect, we borrow on the roads. The infrastructure should last at least the lifespan of the maturity period. Other than that, there's no reason going to borrow. You see, and it has both economic and social interpretation. This is it. If I have my son and I want to build a house for him, and I go to borrow, and of course, if they give him a maturity period of, say, 40, 50 years, my son should be able to enjoy the house at least the lifespan of the maturity period. If, as a country, we go to borrow for 30 years, 40 years, and we build our road, and it's just after 5 years, you see potholes all over, then we haven't done anything. We have deferred the payment now to the generations to come. The Minister of Finance just went for Eurobond, 40 years. So he should also tell Ghanaians, the infrastructure or whatever you are going to invest in, is it going to last the 40 years? That is basic.
Okay. Let's talk about the banking sector. He made a bold claim. We are going to pay everybody 100%.
Who he made?
Yeah, Dr. Bawumia made that the government was going to pay everybody in the banking sector cleanup. I've had, I think we had Mr. Jackson here, and we've had other economists here as well who seem to think that would be very hard to do. We should just tell people that you've lost your money. We'll pay you. You'll get some money, but you won't get all the money. But here he is. He's guaranteeing those who lost their money from the banking sector, the savings and loans, the microfinance, everybody will be paid back 100%. Can the economy support that?
Already we've raised the public debt. So he's been issuing some bonds to do that. If he's going to really use the funds he raises from the sale of bonds for that, for that specific purpose, then we can agree with them. Okay. I must say that I haven't done any intensive research on that banking sector. But what I can say from the budget and all that is that, first of all, the banking sector, we were confronted with the problem. And I think the approach was quite radical. My fear is that with the approach that this administration has used, if we are able to maintain the focus and go forward, it is good. But if we miss the mark and people start misbehaving again, the repercussions will be worse. It will hurt the economy more than the 13 or 18 billion that we are talking about. So that should be my conclusion on that. That we should be careful not to get ourselves into the problem again. Because the implications, the effect of that will be greater. Because already we haven't finished recovering from that. The banking and insurance subsector has been growing negative. It started growing positive since the last quarter of 2018 coming to 2019. Before that, it was going negative because of the suffering. So if it has picked up, it's good news. But care must be taken because there's something about finance. It is not, we should not treat finance just as we treat any other variable. Somebody will say, Sikamperov, money doesn't like noise. Because inflation and exchange that we talk about, there's something we call expectation. Now, expectation can really make a variable go up or down. It's not like a great daddy, I say, I'm going to farm, no expectation. Without rain, I can have irrigation. But with the banking, with the finance, expectation really plays a key role. So when you make an announcement, you remember there was a time the Bank of Ghana announced that they were going to pump, is it 20 billion or so? Remember, everybody reacted and they didn't pump anything. It was just expectation. So when you make certain pronouncements, a certain announcement, and people perceive, because everybody has worked hard for this money. So I am not going to react to whatever I am seeing now. But what if you make an announcement, I lose confidence in you. Now consumer confidence has gone down. Many people want to save. Many people have shifted to this mobile money thing because they know that it's not, their wallet. No savings and loans and all that. But I want to advise Ghanaians that let's go back, invest in the banks. So let's be careful that we don't go back to the problem.
All right. I want you to hold on for me
Yes.
there. Let me go to Honorable Suyini so that he can also do his breakdown of some of the numbers that he had. Franklin and then Franklin has been writing copiously. This is the first time I've seen Franklin write so much during the big the big issue.
Probably that.
He's calculating numbers there.
I'm calculating my own debt.
I think Doc has done some very interesting analysis, but because he's not a politician, he doesn't give it the political color, as Franklin will say. So he doesn't call it what it is. The statistical galamsey. Because he's not a politician, but he actually...
That is your interpretation.
No, he actually describes it. And I'll give you an example. When he talks, for example, about the comparison Dr. Baumia does with
The rebase.
before rebase and after rebase, that's completely illegal. And that is what Doc speaks of. And brings...
When
and
you
makes
use the term
and
illegal
makes-
like that, I cringe.
No, it's statistically illegal. I mean, you don't do that in statistics. That's what I mean.
But
It's
It's not like...
Probably you say
didn't do that.
inappropriate, but
But
you
it's
say
political
illegal.
communication.
But Abomey didn't do that. I was only making a point
Right.
that whether you use the before
It matters
rebase,
the point I'm coming
the
to.
ratio is worse.
It's worse, yes.
Even if you use the rebase ratio across board.
Yes.
So it's not like before for NDC and after MP. No.
No,
But the point he's
The
making,
point I'm
which is
making, let me
also
finish.
true.
Let me finish. Let me finish
Let's
the
see
point
what
I'm
the
making.
point
If
is.
I
Maybe
finish,
I
you get.
understand.
If I finish the point, you get the point. What I'm saying. So, for example, when you are calculating the rate, which we all agree, yes, has slowed down. But when you use the NDC's own against before rebase, and then you use yours, which is after rebase, the figures, look very huge apart.
Okay.
Do you understand? So,
But
the
but-
point Doc is making, which is correct, is that it must be constant. There must be predictability. If you are doing the comparison, your figures should be before rebase. This was it under NDC, and this is it under MPP. And after rebase, this is it under NDC, and this is it under MPP. That is a correct assessment. But what Dr. Baumia does is he will do the NDC before rebase and do the NPP after rebase.
No, I don't think
he disagrees
I don't
with.
think that is
That is
what
what
he
he
said.
disagrees
He
with.
talked about the base
The
from
base.
which
The base should
from
be the same,
36
uniform.
Then,
to
okay, let me
102,
move. Let me make
100
progress.
something.
Let me
No
make
worries.
So let me help you.
Let me make
The-
progress.
No worry.
No
You let
matter
him
the
go on.
base,
Yeah.
it is worse off.
Yes, I agree.
No matter
I
the
agree.
base.
I agree.
No
It's-
matter which base you
use, it is
it's
worse.
off. Yeah.
But again, he talks about the
That's the
off-budget.
political one you want.
He talks about the off-budget borrowing.
Yes.
Something as a minority we have raised repeatedly,
Really?
so many times. When we talk about get fund, the example he gave, being collateralized for loans, you remember we even had to walk out. It is because of some of these things, because they are not captured under the budget. We have been talking recently about GMPC. That is the off-budget borrowing we are talking about. We have raised it several times. ESLA is off-budget borrowing. So if you look at all those debts,
What is ESLA? So
I mean,
that people don't know that.
the
they're talking about
energy
my
sector
friend.
levy that has been collateralized,
That's
for-
also.
I don't.
do you understand? It's all part of the off-budget borrowing. Now, the debts that we owe as a result of us ESLA, Get Fund, and GMPC going out to the market to borrow are not added to this debt that we say our country owes. But we do. Whether we add it or not, we do. So if you added that, the figure will even be more. Now, I'm happy that at least we have all come to the realization and acceptance that borrowing is not bad and is not a lazy way of managing an economy. I'm happy. Even though that was the suggestion before the MPP came to office. We are all on the same page now that borrowing is not bad and it's not a lazy way.
I suspect the point is it's
of
what
managing
you did before.
Fantastic.
What you did before you went borrowing.
I've told you about, and you see, this is a continuation of our first discussion. I told you about the context within which you had to manage the economy.
Yeah.
Now,
that point is made.
Further context. You were borrowing at a time that tax revenue was giving you about 27 billion. Today, you are borrowing at a time that tax revenue is giving you about 40 billion plus. So if somebody was having 27 billion, he had more reason to borrow than you if you are getting 40 billion. I hope you are getting the context. Because if you have 27 billion and the problems you were faced with are the same problems that the person who is getting 40 billion is faced with today, it's just like basic relation with yourself. If you have 27 billion and your needs are about 50 billion, it means that you have to go in for about 23 billion. But if you have 40 billion and your needs are about 50 billion, you just need to borrow 10 billion. You get that? That's another context. Then you were borrowing at a time that it was described as lazy and bad management when you were only getting revenue of about 6 billion from oil. Today you are getting about 20 billion from oil. So the one who just had 6 billion had a more reason to borrow than you do now. But you called it lazy and you justify yours. You had a situation where the one who was borrowing that you call lazy had to pay more for crude in order to keep our electricity on. Today, you are getting gas at a cheaper price that you have control over.
Because you invested in that.
Because we invested in that, even with that borrowing. Do you understand? Now, what did Dr. Bawumia even say under the circumstance? During his State of Ghana economy lecture.
In opposition, you mean?
In opposition.
Okay.
A foundation of concrete or straw. He said, which was proven not to be true, that the NDC government took Ghana's debt from 9.5 billion in 2008, which was as a result of debts accumulated from independence. And that is why I say it's not true, because we all remember the debt write-off under President Kufuor. But he did say in that lecture that from independence, our debt was 9.5 billion by 2008. And that President Mahama and the NDC took it to 105 billion with nothing to show. Now, today, in 3 years, we are speaking about 215 billion. That's over 100% increase. If you don't even want to contest the fact that yes, we took it from 9.5 to 105. You have, according to the figures, increased the debt stock in 3 years, 100%. When you accuse someone of taking it from 9.5 to 100 in 8 years. But the interesting trick, part of this, even this argument, this was supposed to be President Mahama's fault, taking it from 9.5 in 2008 to 105 billion in 2016. It was supposed to be his fault. Yet, when he talks about projects that he invested those in, then they split it and say, no, it was President Mills who started or President Kufuor who started. He doesn't get the credit for what the loans were used for, but he gets blamed for the fact that the loans existed in our books. That is the lack of candor that I speak of. Then you ask yourself, having doubled our debt stock, what do we have to show as a country? At least, in the case of what you criticized before, we have, like Doc suggested, investments that are paying for themselves and that are also generating growth in the economy. I give you the Ghana gas as a practical example.
Okay. You don't see any now?
Show me. You have doubled it, but what we see, and according to even the figures, is that you are pumping everything into consumption. That is things that are recurrent. We just finish consuming it and we need more money to do it. So they by themselves don't really generate anything, at least in the short term, for you to pay for these loans that you are contracting.
But they feel that the weight of something like the free SHS, which obviously you are pointing at, is as significant as Ghana gas.
You see, again...
It depends on where you stand.
Again, no, not really. I think that we must go beyond the box ticking. Education, having education is not just about having access to a 4-square, room and going through a place designated as a school. Let's get that straight. So, giving access to people to go to SHS does not guarantee them education. I hope we understand that.
Definitely.
It does not guarantee them education. So, if your focus is just to make sure that people in 3 years have a place they can leave their homes and go to, called secondary school, you don't calculate its benefits based on the education the people will have in future. Like, if you are able to say that, look, we have made sure that 1,000 students are in SHS. Out of the 1,000, we can guarantee that maybe 600, 700, or 800 of them will become bankers, doctors, and nurses. Because of the quality of education you are giving them, then perhaps you can say that it is a worthwhile investment. But when you pack them in the school for them to stay for 3 years, and that's why I'm saying that if you look at the Human Development Index, it is clear that we are not doing well. And so let us not, hope, given the current reports we are getting, that our investments will be worthwhile. You just don't go and give your money to an investment broker to put it in anything. You need to know and be assured of the returns. But it's as if we are just throwing the money because we want to take a box that we have done free SHS. And that is it. And those were some of the things that, as a party, we cautioned against. Because nobody in this country, not even those who wrote the 1992 Constitution, were against free SHS. Nobody has ever been against free SHS. But you see, if I tell you, Godfrey, that you can't jump out of a moving car, it's not because I think you can't. It's because I think you are smart enough not to do that, knowing that you will end up with broken limbs. So you don't jump out of the moving vehicle with broken limbs and legs and wave at me and say, you said I couldn't jump, I've jumped out. But that's not a reasonable argument to make.
Okay.
So
go on.
So the point has to be made that Dr. Bawumia should come to these discussions, even in terms of debt accumulation, with some bit of candor. He should let us know what his positions were, whether they are consistent with his positions today, and whether as a country we are getting more from the borrowing that we are doing, and our future is better secured with the investments that we are making, with the money that we are getting from these loans that we are taking. We are of the view that whether the rate has slowed down or not, we are not getting the best use of the funds that we are borrowing. And we are not just saying that because of politics. We are saying that it's the correct position because the IMF themselves agree with us that no matter the rates at which we are going, we are heading towards disaster. And especially because of the areas that we are investing this money and how we are investing it. Because some of these investments are riddled with terrible corruption. Terrible corruption. And the civil society organizations, CDD and others, have put estimates to how much we are losing from these borrowed funds that we are corruptly investing in some cases. And so it is important that in doing the assessment, we factor all of these into the picture. Then you look at the banking sector. Again, our friends will want people to believe that the NDC was not interested or has never been interested in cleaning up the banking sector, even though the facts do not support that. What are the facts? In fact, the report, the entire report that the government is basing its choice of a cleanup on was done by the NDC in 2015-2016. The validation report. So, when you go to the hospital and you meet a doctor and he asks you to go and do laboratory tests and you bring your results and that doctor steps out and another doctor looks at the report and prescribes medication to you, do you go home and say the first doctor was not interested in treating you? Do you? Is that being honest? Of course, the first doctor, if he had the opportunity to be there when you returned with your lab results, would have given you medication. Maybe he wouldn't have given you the same medication that you got from the second doctor. And that is the NDC's position. That indeed, we examined the patient. At the time we were to prescribe the medication, we were booted out of power. So a new doctor took over and has administered or prescribed drugs that we wouldn't have prescribed because you don't have only one drug to cure malaria. You can go for, what are the names?
There are a lot of things.
And each drug has consequences. Each drug that you prescribe for a patient has consequences. So our argument is that yes, the patient was examined and our drug would have given the patient good health. I mean, maybe the drug they are administering, like Doc is saying, may be curing. But the consequences will be different. And that is the argument that we make. That the way and approach that they have used could have been better. And we have explained how some of the consequences could have been managed. Look, sometimes we underestimate the impact that this whole rushed and scary, approach that the government used have had on the average citizen. Recently, and I must commend your network for the campaign for us to eat local rice. I was in the northern region where you had farmers who could not get market for their produce. When I went into the matter, I found out that the processors, Avnaj and others, who used to buy from them, could not this year because the microloan schemes that they used to depend on to buy, process, sell, and pay back had suffered as a result of the reckless and scary approach that the government used. Thousands, if not millions, of Ghanaians, as we speak, do not know the state of their investments and have no way of knowing if they are getting their principal with interest or what or how much they are getting. And people,
but Baumia made a clear statement of this.
Died.
You will get your money.
People have died as a result of that. Some are, going through excruciating pains. And when Dr. Baumia comes to make that political statement,
You think it's a political statement?
You want to go back to find out if it is grounded on anything. And then you take the 2020 budget statement, which determines how much government spends, where it spends, and what it spends on. And you don't find a figure that is commensurate with how much is owed out there. So the question is, how are you going to pay everybody when you have not budgeted for it?
Hold on for me. Honorable Alassane Suhuyini, Member of Parliament for Tamale North. We'll take a quick break. We'll continue the conversation. Very interesting dynamics this morning on Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia's Town Hall presentation. When Honorable Suhuyini is done, Franklin Kujo will discover what he's been writing for the past 30 minutes. And then Honorable Aban will wrap up this conversation. After that, we will talk about the coronavirus and why Honorable Aban and his ministry refuse to evacuate Ghanaian students in Wuhan. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the big issue. Honorable Suhuyini was just about to wrap up, and then we'll go to Franklin. Let's just take a few messages that have come through. The panelists should call a spade a spade. If information put out there is misleading, then say so. Do not say it is problematic. Let us all stop being diplomatic when the truth is staring us in the face. Godfred, with all the economic finance experts we have in government and in Ghana, the best they can do is to borrow for their grandchildren to come and pay. This makes a mockery of our education system. Charles Iligo. Well, I hope you heard what Doc said. Borrowing itself is not a problem. Good morning, Godfred. Please ask Dr. Sarkodie what is accounting for the depreciation of the dollar against the cedi. This is Francis from Brigade in Kaswa.
Sure.
I'll give you time for that later. Kwesi Reynolds in Agona Odobin says Dr. Bawumia's economic prowess needs a serious economic intellectual to match him. He approaches issues with undisputed facts and figures, which throws the opposition in a state of disarray. All the economic indicators are positive and strong. You can always respond with propaganda, but figures don't lie. So if at first things are moving fast and now it has slowed down as shown by Bawumia's data, why don't the NDC appreciate it? I don't think they have this country at heart. We must not at all costs mislead the good people of Ghana because we are educated. We must give praise where praise is due and criticize where we need to. But always criticize where there's no criticism is uncalled for. So these are some of the messages that have come through. I'll go to Twitter in a bit. Let's, Honorable Suhuyini, wrap up for me, your final point, and then I go to Franklin.
Well, I intended to wrap up on another note, but just some of the text message, I think I'll wrap up on that note. I mean, yes, the figures may not be manufactured, but any student of economics will tell you that statistics cover what you want it to cover. You know, the numbers may not be wrong, but how you interpret the numbers can be wrong, you know, or can satisfy what you want it to satisfy. And that is why, for example, when interest rates, inflation rates were all coming down, Dr. Bawumia still had a way of analyzing it in such a way that they looked bad. And now that they are down, he has found another way of making them look good because it suits his case. Then the rate of borrowing coming down. Our point is not that, you know, it is a bad thing. But we are saying, first of all, that was not the promise. So don't, you know, make it seem like that was what was promised and what is delivered. Again,
especially in the context when you are looking at your manifesto.
Yes, when you are looking at your manifesto and suggesting that borrowing in general was a lazy way and a bad way of managing an economy. Then again, the question of, yes, the rate may have slowed down, but what are you using the borrow funds for? And how will the, you know, choices that you are making, you know, going to impact on future generations in terms of their ability to pay for this loan. So if you talk about how much the NDC borrowed, for example, I've given you the Ghana Gas, I can tell you about the Ridge Hospital, I can tell you about the Tamale Teaching Hospital, I can tell you about the Upper East Regional Hospital, I can tell you about the Tamale Airport, I can tell you about, and these are all productive things. I mean, today, our revenue, for example, has increased. Our revenue has increased in terms of how much GRA collects because of the expansion in our ports. That makes, goods movement easier and also attract more people to bring in goods.
But we also tell you, also partly due to some of the interventions he has made.
No, you see, again, yes.
For ease of doing business.
It is true that those enhancements have been made. But like Doc was saying, it should not be about I am worse than you. It should be about I'm better than you. For example, in those areas, paperless. Go check when paperless started. Paperless was actually part of the port expansion project. It was part of the port expansion project. So if it got to the implementation where you were the one there, and you did a good job of implementing it, you don't make it look like your predecessors were worse. Because you see, they conceived that whole idea of expanding the ports, which included making it paperless. You couldn't have expanded the ports without making it paperless. All
right, and I will wrap up.
Thank you.
All right. Franklin,
well, first of all, I must say that the conversation is very rich. Dr. Sarkodie, right? And I think the IFS has been doing this rather wonderful job when it comes to the public financial management, if like issues in the country. I recall the time we collaborated with them to discuss what was it again? It was about securitizing some of our oil. Mm-hmm. And I saw the depth to which they went, especially on issues of public financial management. So that was a rich expose, and very few people are able to speak, even when they're academics, in a manner that is very convincing. But having said that, I think there's a lot of candor that is expected, if you were just looking at things from a purely economic view, for academic purposes. But this is the political economy conversation, and we are in an election year. I keep saying that what you say, how you sell your message is very crucial. While we have all accepted that, yes, some of the examples may have been self-serving, it is also not in doubt that the base on which they were coming from cannot also be disputed. But examples, the characterization, the definitions given, the pun, the flowery language, and of course, indeed, the rather satirical aspect of it all counts in an election year. So I could say that I expect the opposition to find a way of also telling their story. And I think some of you really have. I heard John Jinapor speak about the energy issues, and he was super excellent. I think there's a part of this conversation which is rather interesting as well that I think Suhini brings, is the issue about legacy and the contributions of what others may have done to warrant these kinds of growth that you see, which I think is something we should be getting towards. I know about the American example. People say all sorts of things. Well, Obama did something, but of course Trump has done much more. But there's a base on which the Trump started. And I see the interventions that were made by the previous administration, especially when it comes to certain critical infrastructure. And I think we should also at least yield that they did something positive. On the specific matter of debt, as has been agreed that none comes top clean, it looks to me that I'm more interested in the behavior that actually would have led to you actually going to borrow. Even if indeed borrowing is not a bad thing, of course, debt is what makes the world go round, right? Rich people still owe. But it depends on what they do with the money. And I suspect that, and again, to go back a little bit, Suhini, it's true that you guys didn't have a much bigger base, and there were the vagaries of international economic forces at play, which you couldn't really have handled. But there was absolutely no need to have done single spine the way it was done, because you quadrupled the wages all of a sudden without a fallback plan, when you knew very well that the vagaries of within the international political economy couldn't have also helped the situation. It's true that the basis, if you look at the figures, they are quite smaller. But if you fast forward to this administration as well, it is true. If you look at the port figures, for instance, from 2015 all the way to 2013, well, 2015 all the way to 2016, they were very, well, there was some improvement, but the figures were not as, were smaller. But from 2017, from about 7 billion, we shot to almost 9 billion. Now we are almost 2018, we did 12 billion from the ports alone. I mean, we were likely to do a bit more, probably 13 and over. But for the same things we are talking about, all of a sudden, from nowhere, the government decides that in a town hall meeting, the vice president announces that there's going to be a 50% benchmark reduction in the benchmark values for certain goods, and I think 30% for vehicles.
For political reason, you said.
Yeah, but that's the point I'm making. So the question you ask yourself is, in one breath, Dr. Sarkodie talks about the fact that your tax revenue in itself is shrinking. Here you are, you've actually engaged in enhanced paperless, and I yield to your point about you started paperless, but it was enhanced under this administration. Your enhanced paperless port is giving you an average of almost 25% increase in port revenues. Then in one fell swoop, without doing any proper analysis, because it gave you 12 billion in 2018, and in 2019, instead of giving you significantly higher, it actually dropped by just that singular act of reducing the benchmark values. And because you didn't plan ahead to ensure that at the port these things were strictly followed, it went and covered so many other goods to the extent that your tax revenue actually reduced. Well, you can say that revenue in general may have increased to about 40 billion. But in actual fact, if these interventions were economic, they would have increased the base much, of course, the tax revenue much more. If these interventions, like the rebates they give, the tax rebates they give, which at the point was about 125% of the previous year, which was close to about 2 billion Ghana cedis in just tax waivers, which again were not economic, and it's something I think we could do together to investigate the impact of tax waivers on the economy. Now, to these things, when you do them, you actually depress revenues that are needed, were they even to be used for proper investment, but you still depress them, and then increases your appetite to go and borrow elsewhere in order to fix some of these gaps. So please, by all means, say the component of the tax revenue as against GDP. You should say it, because one of our fellows, Professor Buckin, we had a presentation, and he did say, and he sounded quite alarmist as well at the time, that if we look carefully at the debt profile, if we don't take care, we might go to the IMF much sooner than we think. So don't hold back. I think it's important to bring that data out, because there's a way we need to start communicating and let people understand that the politics of this country is not for the political communicator. It is about the development of the entirety of the country. And when these things are seen and heard a lot more, it helps shaping conversations. Because I don't want people on Facebook to be talking only about things that, of course, people say all kinds of things. We need the language to be richer. It all helps us. Which also means that at the end of the day, if within the same economy, you are going to find money, probably 13 billion or so, in order to pay the depositors who have lost money. It's very instructive. You need to understand what exactly will be informing that. Were these banks, non-financial bank institutions, keeping proper records? How have you calculated the entire the value that you really, and how did you arrive by it? I think it's important. Because again, what is emerging from the conversations is that governments sometimes like to not necessarily hide things, but in a way, they probably have better context than most of us commentators and those of us who watch things really do. Trust me, there are some conversations I've been privy to that only because I got closer, you never hear. And when that happens and it affects your public reporting, then we should see them affecting your public reporting so that somehow we can tell the true state of what we are actually dealing with. I have no doubt at all that the government will find money to pay these persons. I'm only worried that the suggestions that all of them will be paid without also having context as to the quantums of money that people owe is another. What I think the government should do in order for this not to fail, if they've got the money, is to ensure that the money is actually sitting there before they let people go for the money. So that people don't do like the Women's Good and all of that. But the point also ought to be made that your debt is increasing. And to the extent that these very acts themselves are adding up to the debt stock, I call it the debt iceberg, then it begins to look that you may not have any warming sooner in order to melt this iceberg. It's very important and it's alarming that we should be hearing that 35 billion of our money will be going into amortization, as Dr. Sarkodie has said. This is scary, and if you add all of that, if you are spending more than half of your total revenues and grants on servicing debt, the question ought to be asked, what mechanisms are you adopting to move away from that? Maybe it is in trying to secure, collateralize our mineral resources, as the government wants to do. But even that has to be clearer, because of the Chinese, as we've known, they don't really care how you're going to pay back. In fact, they don't want your bauxite. They just want their money. So whether they're helping you do Sino-Hydro or what have you. So all of these have to put into context. You need close to $1.5 billion or 2 billion in order to unlock all these resources from the bauxite fields. But you are still looking to the Chinese to give you some concessions to do other things. Borrowing 50 years, 40 years, and what have you, I think the examples have been replicated, and I think it's important that however you look at it, whatever interventions we make today, the borrowing must be serving a purpose. I can see somehow where the government is headed to by saying, well, look, we don't want to invest in fiscal things that you see. Even though this year they said they invest in roads, because now they see the politics of it. Not just the politics, but the economics of it. As Professor Sarkodie has also suggested, the economics of it is important. So don't just go and construct roads hurriedly, so that 2 years down the line, they develop potholes, because that increases your debt burden, really. I think it's important that they may be saying that, well, we are investing in education. And as Sweeney has said, it's important to also ask the question, could you have done it a bit better? If the economy has done well, as you say the economy has done well, what it means is that it's reflected in the pockets of people. Shouldn't people also be contributing towards education? Why should the private SHS be staffed of peoples? Why should I went to my school last week, and the headmaster was giving me an update of the critical situation they are facing in St. Mary's Seminary, Lulubi Kumasi. That's my hometown, by the way. And when he gave me a situational report, the students are writing exams, third-year students are writing exams at the end of March. The whole school, of 1,000 population, has only 2 maths teachers. They need 16 teachers as we speak. What I told them was that, well, let's know what it will cost in order to bring teachers from around the area, because there are 2 training colleges in Hohoi. There's St. Francis and St. Teresa's. I said, well, some of us will put together and foot the bill at least for 2 months. This? Oh, well, I'm saying it now, but I didn't want to make. I just got convened. That's why I was writing a lot to share some of these examples that I decided that the first and present danger ought to be cleared, and we'll take the bill ourselves as old students. But going forward, we need dedicated interventions. So maybe we want the National Service, for instance, to help us with teachers who do that. But it's important that the parent-teacher associations that today seem not to be party to the conversations, and I think on your own network, there's a lamentation by a parent that whenever they've tried to do something, well, apart from some headmasters trying to do A, B, C, D with the money, the point really is that their role has been dwarfed. What it tells you is that if that was not done, they were going to contribute, so that in my school, I would be seeing that at least the parents will be contributing at least to the vehicle the headmaster uses, which is a very rickety old car.
Okay, point me.
No, I'm just trying to say something.
Let me go to Honorable Abba.
No, I think these are interesting conversations, so it drew me to write quite a lot. So while we ourselves, I'm giving an example of also, by using my school and not going to the GES directly now to ask for teachers immediately, is to say that I see the need. I'm not now going to write letters and say, wait, they have to find us teachers by the end of March, so that the 400 students who may be dealing with just a single maths teacher or general science teacher, what can we do to help? It is in the same spirit that if you've developed the economy as a tout, we should be able to make a little contribution to a sector that is gobbling up a lot of our resources anyway. That is the way you don't go back to the IMF and you don't increase the debt stock.
Thank you very much.
Which I call the iceberg.
Thank you very much, Franklin Kujo. Honorable Aban, for the next 45 minutes, we are on you, because after this, we are talking coronavirus. So let's take your analysis of everything, and then we start coronavirus.
All right.
And our students in Wuhan.
Thank you very much. I think I will start my contribution on this by dealing with the banking crisis.
Okay.
And in his analysis, Honorable Suhini created a scenario using the hospital, okay, that somebody falls sick, he goes to the doctor, doctor says, oh, go get a laboratory test done. By the time the results are presented, the doctor who made the recommendation for the lab tests
has been kicked out,
and a new doctor comes and he gives a prescription that in his mind the old doctor may not have given because of the apparent devastating effects of, or side effects of, the prescription given by the new doctor. What he fails to see is that in the financial sector or in the banking sector, these, let's say, ailments, okay, start with their symptoms, small, which the doctor, okay, must see early enough and quickly deal with it decisively, even before asking that people should go to the laboratory, because these are known symptoms and you know the various protocols that must be used even to deal with it. So it's not about even going to ask somebody to go to because I'm going to say this. You know, every year, all the banks, all the financial institutions are required to submit reports. And in fact, sometimes it's even on quarterly basis, right? I'm speaking, this one, maybe I will say with some kind of authority, as somebody who did my master's in banking and financial law only, right? And somebody who worked with Ghana Stock Exchange and knew how these things were being done, the reporting systems and all that. We had Banking Supervision Division, whose duty it is to make sure that every now and then reports, accurate reports, are generated. And because the human nature is such that if you give him a blank check, he will withdraw, it is not only for you to sit back and receive reports, because some of these reports may have been concocted, if I should put it that way. Right? Now you sit by for it to fester and get to a point where it had become so perilous to not only those institutions themselves, but even to the banking sector in general, the financial sector in general, right? And then, having sat by and not taking decisive steps to make sure that we clean the financial sector as early as it should be, it gets to a point that now, if the new doctor does not take decisive steps, it's going to create a contagion, and people may not even have any confidence at all in the banking sector. Right? What is surprising is that the NDC would always say that, no, we wouldn't have done it, but they have never told us how they would have done it.
Oh, we have, many times.
Now, if we should use the American experience, the meltdown in 2007, 2008, as any example to guide us, the first thing that the government did was to do the bailout, right? And in that bailout, taxpayers' dollars were used to cushion the floundering financial sector, right? What did they do? They took the bait and then worked with it positively, to the extent that, as at now, based on information that I have, they do not owe the government anymore. All those monies have been paid, and the money that they borrowed, if I should put it that way, right, the bailout money that they received has been paid, and they are now on sound footing on their own. In Ghana, what happened? Similar bailouts were given, right? And those bailouts were not applied prudentially, as would be required of ordinary skillful banker. They rather went into some kind of profligate spending, right, to the point of even criminality.
Yeah.
And that's why some people are actually
before courts,
trial, right? In a situation like this, where capital had been gnawed off and depositors' money had even been used, I think the most prudent measure that a doctor in that situation, and by this I mean the government, would do, would be to stop the hemorrhage. So because after all, there was nothing. They were just running shells of banks. And so they had to just stop all of them, get consolidated CBG, started negative. Now, at least from the learning I have just got from the doctor, now we are in a positive numbers, right? I know that for political, social reasons, not necessarily economic reasons, people are going to lose jobs, blah, 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 blah. Yes, we know that became the bad side effect, which he was alluding to, even though he did not say it in so many words, right? So if these were the bad side effects, the question is, do you use capital to pay an employee? How is the business going to survive? What I know is that when you have received your revenue, right, and that revenue is over and above your working capital and all the other expenses, it's only then that you say that, yes, you are in business. But if for every month you have to use capital to pay workers, it will get to a time that you will tell workers, go. By that time, depositors who have not committed any crime and whose only business was to put their money in your safekeeping would have also lost all that. So was it not appropriate to stop the hemorrhage and prevent depositors who are innocent people from also losing their amount? In the final analysis, we now even know that a lot of depositors lost their money, right?
Then the government said they'll pay back in full.
Good. Now, government has spoken, but me as a person, the little I got to know is that when you go through issues, apart from maybe issues of banking, where it is depositors' money and the reasonable expectation is that he's going to get back. When it gets to issues of like the men's gold and those that are investment vehicles, properly so called, the general thinking is that it is not every investment that returns gives a positive return, right? And so even for those people, if we're just going to do it by the books, I would have said that they did their gamble. If they have lost, that's it. But of course, we are looking at it from the point of social intervention, how devastating this is going to have on people, blah, 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 blah. So I think the decision is that pay them, right? Thankfully, they themselves are also calling on government to pay them, knowing the difficulty it is to do so.
Well,
right?
because in opposition, your party decided to weaponize DKM as a campaign message.
Good. So
DKM was not even licensed, like under the Bank of Ghana license at the time. So
in fact, I do not even want to go into this, but here I have not minced words at all. I've always blamed the Securities and Exchange Commission. I've blamed the Bank of Ghana, especially the men's gold thing, because I remember way in 2017 I started raising the alarms, but probably because I don't have letters on my name. People didn't hear me. Right?
I think it's important. Let me interject a bit.
Okay.
I think it's important for the government to also state that they are not going to pay the accrued interest, because those interests were monstrous. They should be able to say exactly what they want to pay.
Well, the details of this we must ask.
I'm sure
the details will come.
So that people don't have the expectations that
100%.
No, so that they don't have the expectations that they don't have the expectations that
He said that
to be unfair to us
deposits.
Taxpayers.
He says nobody will lose their money.
Deposits.
Yes, because the thing is
So
that
the amount they initially deposit.
I myself, I think I will even raise hell.
Because
if those humongous expectations are also paid. Because those things, oh yes.
Then go and ask your people.
Then tell us what you are paying and how much you are paying.
What you communicate is very important.
Yes, I'm stating my point clearly. Because the point is that, for me, from day one, I had said that those kind of mouth-watering interests that had been promised were unsustainable. And indeed, no business was going to be able to turn those deposits to make such huge payouts as interest on the amount. So I had, from day one, described men's gold, US group of companies, those things. I had described them as Ponzi schemes, and they came to pass. Right? But, so having dealt with the banking crisis, I think that the consensus must be built on the fact that what the government did was the right thing. All those who know real banking, who know real finance, have not said otherwise. Everybody says that the cleanup, that was the best. Because for me, I do not know what kind of prescription the NDC was going to give. Otherwise,
Mr. Setekwe has spoken on this several times.
Look.
Can I just
it would just have been palliative. Okay, that prescription would just have been palliative, and the sore would still have been there festering. No. And one time it would have exploded again.
All right.
Anyway,
wrap up for me, so we go to Wuhan.
Oh, you did not even let me talk about all the.
Hey, you spent quite a bit of time.
I'm just only with the banking issues.
Yes, but you've done that for 17 minutes. Actually.
I see.
Wow. As you guys, I keep looking at my watch. I am a stickler for timekeeping here.
Okay. So let me just.
Pardon?
The city, will we talk about it?
Don't worry. I want to deal with him.
Okay, so
there's a statement out I want you to answer.
Let me try and wind up with the issues about, and here too, I'm dealing with Honorable Suhuyini and how he started and all the scenarios that he created. right? That if you had 23 billion, okay, and you needed 50 billion, or if you had 27, good, and you needed 50 billion, your propensity, okay, or your desire to borrow is higher than somebody who had 40, okay, and he needed only 10, right? Fine, well, very nice scenario. But what are you going to use it for? He doesn't talk about.
Okay.
Right? Now, it appears to me that to him, government delivers only when infrastructure is made. Right? So he quickly points to a few things. Well, I can assure you that
every first economy became first economy through infrastructure. You can't challenge.
I can assure you that every country that has developed actually took education seriously.
Okay, point well made.
I was going to give you an example.
No, we know the examples. I am moving on there. Let me talk. Doc, I'll give you 5 minutes when this is over to do the CD.
But
all right.
Something quickly.
Franklin, there's no time for you.
Just quickly.
No, there's no. It can't be quickly enough for me. Let me talk about Wuhan. So we have. You see, the fact that he is here.
No, I just wanted to say something.
I need him to answer these questions for me.
No, but he's here. It's not going anywhere.
We have 30 minutes.
I could have done it while you were going back.
So they do gamma lizard later. The outbreak of the deadly coronavirus is on. Everybody's talking about this. The Ghana Health Service did a press conference this week to explain why it will only evacuate Ghanaian students who are in Wuhan, who are asking to be evacuated based on risk assessment. So we'll just listen to this quickly, and then we'll come back. We'll hear from the students as well. And then there's a statement out from the Global Union of Ghanaian Scholars, which is the mother body of Ghanaian students in the diaspora, who have just issued a statement this morning to your office. I'm going to read it to you.
Okay, then read it. I have not seen it.
So we'll hear from we'll hear the report first, and then we'll hear from the students.
The Ghana Health Service, at a press briefing this week, said the evacuation of Ghanaians in China is not an option. The minority earlier had issued an ultimatum to government on the matter of evacuation. With the ultimatum running out and the decision going against their wishes, they say they will escalate the matter on the floor of Parliament.
They told us that government decision was not to evacuate. And I outlined the reasons why I think they should evacuate. So we never, let's set that record straight, because I've heard that in the media, that we as a committee have agreed that government should not do evacuation. That is palpable falsehood. We have never agreed. At this point in time, together with my colleague ranking on foreign affairs and leadership and the minority, we have decided to come by a motion to debate the matter on the floor of the House for government to tell us why they think that it is not necessary to evacuate students from Wuhan to Ghana, whilst other countries are doing same.
A Deputy Minister of Health.
We have come across the press statement from the Ministry of Health and the Ghana Health Service declaring the position of the government of Ghana that they are not planning to evacuate us now. They are monitoring the situation. And I wish to express our disappointment as Ghana students in Wuhan at the moment. We feel very much disappointed in the whole thing and how the Ghana Health Service and the experts are narrating our situation here. We wish to express the sentiment that, in fact, our government is disappointing us because we feel disappointed. We believe that where there is a will, there is a way. And I wish to reiterate that they should stop treating us as if we are the virus or we are infected. I can say on the record that no Ghanaian student or citizen in Wuhan has been infected by the virus. And there is also WHO or World Health Organization standardized procedure for undertaking evacuation, which is all the students are picked up from their various locations to a central location, where they are medically tested and thoroughly screened to make sure that none of them is infected before they are allowed to board. And upon arrival in Ghana, we are screened again and we are quarantined for a number of days.
We are indoors. Today is about 21 days since the lockdown, and it is very devastating, as I said. And we still call on the government of Ghana to reconsider its decision and come to our aid and evacuate us. Our compatriots from Algeria, from Egypt, even Libya have evacuated their students from Wuhan. Wuhan is the epicenter where the seriousness of the virus is.
So you heard from the students, they heard from Honorable Kando as well. Let me just read quickly the update that has come through from the Global Union of Ghanaian Scholars, and then I can talk to Honorable Aban. The leadership of the Global Union of Ghanaian Scholars, the umbrella body for Ghanaian Students Association in the diaspora, would like to update all its members and stakeholders on the progression of the disease, most especially in China. As of February 6, 2020, confirmed cases in China, which include cases confirmed in Hong Kong and Macau, total 28,004, with 566 deaths. Well, there's a significant update on that. Now, the thrust of the message is this. As we continue to encourage and assist our members within China and all affected geographical areas, we urge the government of Ghana, and they have put this in bold, we urge the government of Ghana to evacuate all Ghanaian students from the Wuhan city, Hubei province, as soon as practicable. Ghanaian students within this landlocked city are above all at a high risk of contracting this fatal disease. Wuhan is estimated at 4.9%, the highest of any city affected by this outbreak. That is the probability of attracting the disease if you are there. Moreover, city lockdown and disease scare has descended on the mental health of our non-working class students in Wuhan. Also, as carried out by other nations, it will not be far-fetched to undertake evacuations with urgency. Howbeit, we encourage the strict adherence to the World Health Organization's international traffic technical guidance on exit and entry screening to ensure that the virus is well contained and eventually eradicated. We, however, acknowledge the efforts of the Ghana Embassy in China, working on ways and means to aid the students most affected. And I must admit, yesterday I spoke to an officer at the Ghana Embassy in China who gave me an update on what they had been doing. We are also continuing in our efforts as a global body to ensure that our members are in their best physical and mental health. Now, we also have parents of these students coming out now to say, look, whatever it is you do, get our kids back home.
Some of them have been offering to pay
for it. And last week I had a colleague who could afford it and found his way back home.
Wow.
So, and he's saying that
he came to Ghana.
Yes.
And that is
has he been quarantined?
No.
He was not.
And now, the reason why he came to spoke to me about was that he said when he got to the airport, because we had done a report where the airport had updated us on what they were doing. But he said he got in and it was normal.
There's no.
And
but that's because the route he used, he wasn't coming on the flight directly from China.
It does not matter where it is you are coming from.
But that's the point.
When they open your passport, they will see where you are coming from. They will see your flight and where you are coming from.
So Ghana must have protocols at the airport.
Yeah. So you mean he came in here without any current?
No, because he went home after that. When I spoke to him, he was eating fufu at home.
I hope he's fine.
He's fine. But he spoke to me also about, and perhaps that is where...
On what flight did they come?
Calm down.
That's not safe.
He spoke to me, Honorable Aban, about the effect mentally. Because he says now, even when you have a cough, you break down because you think something is happening to you. You know?
Just had a cough.
It's ongoing. Why is it so difficult for your office to say, we want to bring the students? So we talk about risk assessment and all that. Update us, what is happening? Because that's what the pressure is.
The Deputy Minister of Health.
Yes.
Did you mention that?
Yes, he's the Deputy Minister of Health.
I want people to know.
That is why he's here.
Yeah.
He comes for updates.
I see. Okay, so let's get this coronavirus thing. Let's get discussion going. I must start with my own empathies for our compatriots who are caught in that crossfire. Because I'm sure the mental effect would not be easy to carry, right? When you sneeze, you immediately think, have I got it? When you cough, you immediately think, have I got it? And I'm sure it is that psychological warfare that they are actually battling in their mind, which is actually calling for all the evacuations. And the fact that some countries have evacuated their nationals. Now, let me start here. As by admitting that as far as medicine is concerned, I am a layperson.
You're not an expert, yes.
We are only dealing with issues of policy.
You're a lawyer.
Right? Oh, I don't want you to say that. Good. So, having said that, the best we can do would be to rely heavily on the experts. Right? So, that is what informed decision whether we should evacuate or not. Okay. Now, we know that, of course, the epicenter of this is Wuhan, right, in the Hubei province.
Yes.
Good. We also know that China is a vast piece of land.
Yes.
There are many others who may not be very, very close at all to the epicenter of the outbreak. The other fact, I'm just isolating the facts, then we'll deal with it. The other fact that we know now is that after the huge outbreak and the surge, the quick surge, it tapered, and I think it is now dropping. So it appears to me that the containment is actually beginning to take shape. Now, I want to start the analysis with an example here. If we recall, there was some outbreak of some strange disease in Kumaka, right? What happened then? Of course, that we may say
Kumaka is in Ghana.
Is in Ghana. Here.
What is Kumaka?
Is it not Kumasi Academy?
Yeah.
Yes. That we may say is on a micro level, but I think that in terms of its protocols, it's not too different. When that happened, there were calls, okay, for people to go back to their various homes, right? That call was rightfully ignored. And one person who had actually gone home was brought back, so that we did not increase any risk of a spread. So it was contained in there, dealt with.
Okay.
And that everybody's mind was then at ease that once it had been dealt with at where it had occurred, and people had actually not moved out, the thinking that it would even spread was quite remote. Now, with the advice that we have received, what we know is that the standard protocol is that you deal with the epidemic where it has actually occurred, so that you prevent it from spreading. Now, let us look at how it got to Hong Kong. Let's look at how it got to Japan. Let's look at how it got to UK. In all this, the common factor was travel or evacuation.
Yes.
People who carried it out.
Yes.
Okay? And so they went and created their own set of, their own pockets of epicenters to start spreading where it was. Right? I can assure you that if we should even go and evacuate, the question, many questions would arise.
Like?
Who and who and who and who are we evacuating? Are we taking all our students in China?
Let's say those in
Are
Wuhan.
Those in Wuhan?
Yes.
Good. So that's what we
100 plus, I think, Swing.
Yeah.
Good. That's what people are calling for.
That is what they are calling for, not people.
Okay. Okay. They are, of
They are
course,
their parents.
yes. What about? What I know that most of this has to do with the psychological warfare. But what about if in their places of isolation they are given the logistics and things that would make them physically comfortable? I know that it is psychologically heart-rending to see that maybe just around things are going on, people are dying and all that. I know, right? But I think the Ghana Health Service said that we have to do what we call the risk assessment, right? If we should bring them to Ghana, suppose we have even created centers.
Yes, you have.
Yes, I know. Okay, to deal with it. Okay. Do we have? I'm only hasn't. I mean, I'm just
Sure.
yes. Do we have what it takes to prevent outbreak in Ghana?
Wow.
I'm only asking.
Wow.
So
Okay.
what have you said the centers are for?
Wow.
No, of course. Listen, we have set up the centers to make sure that in case, okay, something should occur, we deal with it. But the point is that do we?
But if something
really-
should occur, you will
do
not
we-
be able to deal with it.
I'm not saying that.
That's what
No,
you're saying.
Please, I only raise questions. I'm not making statements of fact that we cannot deal with them.
No,
But I'm
no,
telling
no,
you
I'll
that-
not agree with
but
you. You are the
okay,
deputy minister
The
of health.
ministry has
You've set
invested
up
2 million.
Sure, we have invested.
protocols
Yes.
and all sorts of things to deal with this.
Then from there, I'll go to the airport.
Yes.
Things that you're talking about.
You are
Yes.
telling me that if today, touch wood, something happens, you don't know if the protocols you've set up have the capacity to work? Is that what you're saying?
Because you see, maybe I should reframe my
Please go ahead.
my sentence for
Yeah,
all
I
of us
think you
to.
should, 'cause that is alarming. What you said
You
is
see,
very alarming.
listen. What I'm saying here is this: we have set up our protocols. Okay, we have put in place our emergency preparedness and all that to deal with it. But what is this business of we inviting it? Okay.
Really?
Please, let me talk. Let me talk.
Go on.
Okay, because you see, you see.
Yeah. I'm scandalized.
Oh, please let him speak. Let him
He
speak.
has a capacity.
Yeah,
and
that's
they
a
come with
capacity.
numbers.
Yeah.
You see, we are talking about 100 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, 100 people, and don't take that number to be small.
No, we won't.
Okay, if you do the analysis and you think that they are better, it is better to deal with it, contain it there. It is so much better to do it that way than to bring them. Okay? So it is not so much of, whether we have the capacity or not, but it's about the risk assessment.
Okay. And the risk assessment's conclusion is that the Chinese are better prepared to deal with this. So let's leave our people there. If anything happens, the Chinese can deal with it.
That's one.
That is what
and
we've
that's where
concluded.
they are. Okay. If we give them what they need and do not need to come out to mingle with people, they are not in any risk of contracting the disease.
But the point is this: Wuhan is a city in total lockdown. I keep hearing you speak to them via WhatsApp, via phone.
And they are fine.
Who's had access to them physically?
From
your side.
In all
Why
sincerity.
should they?
And just that, no, because they said they keep on checking.
You mean physically?
Yes, because you speak. Hold on, you speak to the people via phone. The people tell you they are not okay.
But you want someone to go in there.
No, yes, the Chinese authorities say they check on them. You are the government. You might want to do an independent check if you want to.
But you just said they speak with them over WhatsApp.
Yeah, I'm just saying, and the people tell you they are not okay in terms of not because they have the disease, but they want to leave.
Now that's what I'm saying. That those kind of, that kind of discomfort would always be there.
Yeah.
That kind of discomfort will be there, not because they are physically in any threat of contracting the disease, but because they feel that, hey, I'm isolated. I mean, you get your own, get locked up in your own room even to see the kind of discomfort that you have. Okay, it is that which is playing on their mind.
But they are 100. We are 30 million here.
We understand.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So you have to
Weigh
all these
the options.
considerations.
But you see, we are talking about.
But for the government, one life is also important.
Of course,
Every Ghanaian life.
Of course, and I'm telling you that.
Every Ghanaian life.
Yes, every Ghanaian life matters. Okay, and I'm telling you that.
So you don't worry. You have to say in this. So stop looking at your watch.
We have examples.
That would be fair.
Hello.
Yeah, because we raise this matter and it's
No,
important.
the whole country has raised this matter.
But it's also important that we give reasons why we disagree with the government's position. So we have
what do we say to the situation where the UK went for the evacuation and finally, okay, had the shock of transporting it there.
Okay, you hold on.
How do you respond to that? Now about the airport thing, I do not know the person you talked to, but I came on a flight, KLM flight, not too long ago. All of us were given some documents to fill, which we did. Okay, and I know that there were some symptoms and other things that they asked people. For instance, if you were coughing, if you were sneezing, and all those kind of things, right? Probably we will say that it's not foolproof, because if I have
people
it
lie,
and I say, and
even
I say
in the doctor's office they lie,
and I say I don't, it means you are just leaving me to go.
Yeah.
I think the next step they have to take is that whether or not you respond positively to those check boxes, they still at least have to take your temperature to see if it's over and above what is normal.
You see, that's the question he's asking you. You are the Deputy Health Minister. Let me take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the big issue. Honorable Suini, we're almost done, so you take 3 minutes.
I am scandalized listening to the
Deputy
Minister of Health on this matter. First of all, we have raised a concern that 2 million Ghana cedis for us to prepare against, the spread of the virus to this country is inadequate. But his explanations even point to how unprepared we are. And it is not just about how unprepared we are, but it's about how the protocols, even your own narration, does not ensure that we don't have a case recorded in Ghana. Because at the airport today, people arrive from China every day with little restriction to mingle with us. Little restriction. So even if you want to think of the selfish reason for the Ghanaian students to remain there, just be aware.
What is selfish?
No, the fact that you don't want to be exposed to the virus.
Risk.
You don't want to increase the risk.
You mean it's
That's what I mean. No,
safety.
I mean it is natural. It's not wrong. There's nothing wrong with being selfish.
We don't want
Please, I don't have time. Let me use my time very well. I beg you.
He has a few minutes.
I beg you. So I'm saying that even if you want to think about how you may be exposed, because Ghanaian students will be brought to increase your risk, think about the fact that every day, even as we speak now, people are arriving from China with little restriction at the airport to mingle with you. And the centers that we claim to have set up with 2 million Ghana cedis, if for nothing at all, our government doesn't even want to test its preparedness by bringing the Ghanaian students home. Because you see, when you bring the Ghanaian students home, like other countries have done, I'll give you the example of Philippines, Mongolia, and Iran. That is even worse track. They evacuated between 30 to 60 of their citizens. When they arrive in the country, they keep them at their containment centers and take them through the protocols until they are satisfied that they can be allowed to go to their families. That, for me, is even a way to test your centers, to be sure that you are prepared and ready. So if you say that ordinary citizens of the world can come into this country with little restriction from China, but bringing your students exposes 30 million Ghanaians to the risk, then I wonder what you are telling us. Look, clearly, at the Rich Hospital and other hospitals that we have been told they are prepared, many of the experts are telling us that nothing is really in place. And so for me, I think the government's decision not to bring these Ghanaian students home is because really, as a country, we are doing nothing about how to ensure that a case recorded in this country does not put all of us in danger. Because if they were prepared, and this is not the first time as a country we have had to deal with some of these threats. You remember Ebola?
Yeah.
And how even Ghana had to become a center for, the distribution of drugs and other countries. We showed leadership at the time as a country. So what is making it difficult for us?
Did we evacuate Ghanaians from those places when we had Ebola?
We did. In
We
some
did
cases.
not. We did not.
Please.
We did not
When
evacuate.
it was
I cannot
necessary,
fact
yeah,
check
we
that.
didn't
We
evacuate.
did not evacuate
We didn't
Ghanaians.
evacuate, but when it was necessary for some of them to move, they were moved, and the centers were here.
Fred, do a quick
But
fact
you
check
see-
for me.
but you
We
see-
did not.
No, yes, we didn't evacuate.
We did not.
I said that we didn't evacuate, but there were no calls, first of all, for people to be evacuated. But our centers were solid and working, and people knew. And the UN actually attested to how prepared we were as a country. So don't even bring that into the equation, because it did not exist at the time. But we are saying that in this case, you have the students, and look, even under normal circumstances, I'm sure you have lived in China before, even on an ordinary day, Ghanaians or Africans or people from other countries living in China is not easy. Even on an ordinary day.
So
It's
you wrap
not
up for
easy.
me.
So when you have the situation that we have now, where there's a complete lockdown, where some of the centers, where some of the universities that these Ghanaian students are, have become centers of treatment centers for this disease. You have no excuse if you especially say you have centers in Ghana to contain the disease from evacuating them and bringing them home.
Yep.
When less endowed countries, I believe, countries that should not be better prepared than we are taking their citizens home. And I am a Ghanaian, I'm sitting there, and I'm hearing that countries that I know my country is better than have come to take their citizens away. And my government says I should die. I should die because if I come home, I will be exposed. I'll be exposing other Ghanaians to that disease.
So, countries that are better than us,
minister
countries
makes
that are better
that
than
point, I'm scandalized.
Countries that are better than us also took their people there and even had the disease. Is that not
I'm
it?
scandalized,
Frankly,
honestly.
I was going to give you 30 seconds, but time is
I
up.
tell you what Uganda has said.
What did
They
you
also
guys
have 105 students in Wuhan.
Quickly.
They said they have only $61,000 they will send to them by mobile phones. That they do not have the knowledge and the money to ferry them into
Ghana is not Uganda.
I agree.
He's only
But I
telling
think
you
the
what
protocols are
Ghana is
very,
not Uganda.
very,
Yeah,
very,
but
very
point
there.
well
And
made
it's important
there.
we
Let me wrap up the conversation. There's been a good chat with Honorable Alexander Aban, Deputy Minister of Health, Member of Parliament for Gomoa West, Dr. Edu Susa Akodie. I spent a lot of time with him today. He's an economist with the Institute of Fiscal Studies because we spent quite a bit of time. Honorable Alasan Suhini, Tamale North Member of Parliament, and of course Franklin Kujo, President
But
of
for the
Imani Africa.
For the fact that this is health, I would have complained that we didn't get time to discuss the policy dialogue
Yes,
series.
I'm sorry, but I'll make it up. I'll make it up to you later. My name is Godfred Akuto Boafo. I hope you enjoyed the big issue. See you next week.
Yes, really.